Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome the guests of honor today. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, online viewers worldwide, welcome to the 2022 Tang Prize Award announcements. I am Grace Huang, your host for today. From June 18th to the 21st, the Tang Prize Foundation will be making the announcements for the laureates of the 2022 Tang Prize in Sustainable Development, Biopharmaceutical Science, Sinology, and Rule of Law. In today's press conference, the 2022 Tang Prize laureate in Sinology will be unveiled. To begin with, I'd like to introduce the guests of honor who are here with us today. Dr. David De-Wei Wang, Chair of Selection Committee in Sinology and also Chair Professor of Harvard University. Dr. Xing-Yi Tian, Academician of Academia Sinica. Dr. Hu Xiaozhen, Distinguished Research Fellow of Academia Sinica. And Dr. Chen Zhenchuan, CEO of the Tang Prize Foundation. And now I'd like to invite Dr. Chen Zhenchuan, CEO of the Tang Prize Foundation, to give us the opening remarks.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Tang Prize Foundation and its founder, Dr. Samuel Yin, I welcome you to the announcement of 2022 Tang Prize in Sinology. The Tang Prize was established by Dr. Yin in 2012. It consists of 4 categories, namely sustainable development, biopharmaceutical science, sinology, and the rule of law. All of them concern important issues of the 21st century. In a globalized world, the study of Chinese culture and civilization is essentially especially important because it helps us understand different cultures and the world better. The Tang Prize Foundation had the great honor of setting up an internationally acclaimed award in this field to reward individuals for their great innovations and contributions. We also hope more people will be inspired to follow in their footsteps and make the world a better place. The foundation also wants to thank the selection committee and its chair, Professor David De-Wei Wang, for their tireless efforts. Congratulations to all the soon-to-be announced Tang Prize laureates, and I wish everyone all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chen. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite Chair of the Tang Prize Selection Committee in Sinology, Dr. David De-Wei Wang, to announce the 2022 Tang Prize laureate in Sinology and to introduce the laureate for us. Dr. Wang, please.
Good morning, everybody. This is a great honor and a privilege for me to be part of the Tang Prize Selection Committee in the category of Sinology. And now, on behalf of the committee, I have the honor to announce that the 2022 Tang Prize in Sinology is awarded to Jessica Rawson. The reason for her being awarded this prize is that for her gift and the mastery of the craft of the visible to read the art and artifacts of Chinese civilization. By giving voice to the ancient world of objects, she has taught generations how to see when they look at things. And her acuity and vast visual learning have given new insight into the world of the lineages, transformations, and migrations of mute things. So this is truly a great moment for us to have come to this unanimous decision that Professor Jessica Rowson is the recipient of the 2022 Tang Prize in Sinology. Now, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce the credits and the credentials of Professor Rowson. And we have prepared a series of PowerPoint slides to share with everybody here and online. So let me begin by introducing Professor Rowson as one of the most important leaders in art and archaeology in Chinese studies in general. Over the past decades, Professor Rowson has led groups and teams of scholars and students and museum collectors and curators in developing a sustained and extremely provocative and profound discoveries of the twists and the turns of Chinese civilization at the emergent moment. Indeed, she has much revolutionized and broadened the scope of understanding of how Chinese civilization has developed in interaction with other civilizations, not only in Asia, but also in Europe. So definitely in terms of transculturation and global interaction, in terms of the discovery and reappraisal, the objects, the things that Professor Rowson has shown us one dimension of a sinology that we have yet to learn, to appreciate, and to understand. So this is her talent. This is her knowledge and her immense embrace of the visual world of things and objects that truly distinguish herself from her colleagues in the immense field of sinological studies. Now, I would like to say a few words about the credits and the background of Professor Rowson, and then I would also introduce to the audience a few highlights of her career. And certainly time is limited, and I can only skim through some of the most illustrious parts of Professor Rowson's achievements. On the slide, you probably could tell that Professor Rowson was trained in the UK, the United Kingdom, and she received her bachelor degrees and PhDs, respectively, from University of Cambridge and SOAS, the School of Oriental Studies, London University. Over the past years, she has taken up numerous important positions academically and administratively. Definitely, her career is not just limited merely to teaching and learning, but also in terms of curating, collecting, and of course, archaeological discovering. And among the many positions she has taken up, we highlight the fact that she has been the first female warden of Merton College of the Oxford University. She was also a pro-vice chancellor of Oxford for many years. On top of that, Professor Rowson has been deeply involved in archaeological and research work related to museum studies, and her long-term relationships with the British museums definitely deserves our respect and attention. On the next slide, you will see that Professor Rowson has received numerous awards worldwide over the past years. To name a few, she was a member of British Academy of Sciences, and also she was an honorary member of the Arts of the Academy of Arts and the Sciences in the United States. In 2017, she was awarded the Charles Lang Freer Medal, one of the highest honors in the field. And also, she was awarded honors such as the CBE and the DBE from the United Kingdom. So definitely, this is a scholar with illustrious credentials to be respected by all of us. And now I'm back to the part of Professor Rausen's academic contribution to the field of sinological studies. As I said at the very beginning of my remarks, Professor Rausen's contribution primarily lies in her artistic and archaeological discovery of ancient Chinese civilization in relation to the rest of the world, particularly Europe. And she particularly calls attention to the fact that traditionally sinology has put very much emphasis on the studies of textuality, archival discoveries, and so on and so forth. By contrast, Professor Rausen turns her attention to the very specific objects, the field of things, of objects, which according to her deserve more, if not equal attention to our understanding of the changes and the continuities of Chinese civilization. So she particularly argued that in her study of the objects, we should pay attention to the language system, the so-called the language of objects. That means the objects are not just merely mute things which exist as such. Instead, objects actually can entertain lots of information and embedded with all the coded icons and the motifs. And these objects are actually speaking back to us generations after generations. The objects actually inform us of the multiplicity of meanings of a significance of a civilization, ups and downs over the past hundreds of years. So these objects constitute a visual system, a system that is composed of numerous icons, motifs, ornaments, artistic expressions, and so on and so forth. And this is, of course, an immense field, and Professor Rausen has dedicated her career to the following four dimensions. So first of all, we wanted to argue that for Professor Rausen, the very question of the patterns, the motifs, the ornamental designs on anything we access on everyday life, in everyday life, from paraphernalia to objects of everyday practice, all these ornamental designs are actually harboring stories, harboring language of objects, which envision and enliven the way we understand and interact with the world. So in her seminal work, Chinese Ornament, the Lotus and the Dragon, this is one of the most accomplished and recommended books for anyone who stepped into the field of art history in China studies. In this particular book, Professor Rausen calls attention to the minor motifs, such as lotus on ceramics, or any kind of artistic objects, artifacts, and so on and so forth, actually conveys images, iconic messages that bring us from not just merely from the central part of China, but all over across Eurasia, all the way to Western civilization. So things we take for granted in the Chinese context may as well be some kind of consequences of intercultural communication over hundreds of thousands of years. And Professor Rausen, through her meticulous study, has told us one story after another about how all these artistic motifs, ornaments such as the lotus and the leaves and so on and so forth, can be understood as a result of transcultural interactions. And beyond this ornamental studies, we come to the next part of her contribution, that is her engagement with the iconic part of Chinese civilization, particularly in the area of architectural and sculptural expressions. So she paid attention to some of the basic architectural designs, such as the framing, such as the settings of the caves in Dunhuang or other Buddhist sites in China, and identifying those architectural motifs and the structural principles which actually indicate an early signs of interaction between Chinese and overseas civilization as far as Mediterranean areas and even ancient Greek and Roman civilizations. So basically, in terms of the spatial interaction of Chinese architectural structure and the composition, we come to realize a very, very dynamic pre-modern Chinese civilization all over the world, with China as both the point of a start and the point of ending. And therefore, this kind of circulatory and interactive transculturation represents a new breakthrough of our understanding of the richness of Chinese civilization in ancient times. The third part of Professor Rowson's contribution has to do with her study of the burial culture, the tomb culture, and the ritualistic exercise in ancient China, Shang Dynasty, Zhou Dynasty, and so on and so forth. Through her study of the composition of art and the religious objects, Professor Rowson came to the conclusion that the composition of all these things and objects constitute an extremely rich story, which tells not only the transitions and the breaks-ups of different dynastic civilizations, but also the continuation and the integration of all these cultural and political and even psychological transmutations from one dynasty to another, from one area to another. And again, here, the motif of transculturation emerged to bear upon our understanding of how richness this culture could really be in ancient times. And lastly, we come to the part of Professor Rowson's latest discovery. That is, this transcultural study through arts, through artifacts, through objects and things are never just merely a mute and invisible kind of a process. Instead, this kind of a process is animated and enlivened by human agency, and even beyond human agency by animals. So here, in her most recent studies, the culture of a horse, the trading of a horse, the use of a horse, and the breeding of a horse has emerged to become truly a new project, which has something to do not only with ancient civilization in its most dynamic sense, but also ancient civilization as a kind of animated and enlivened process going through one generation after another, from one place to another, and from Europe to China, from steppes to the plains. So here, again, you can see the consistent motif of Professor Rowson's study. That is, any culture, Chinese culture in particular, is never an individual and independent culture as such. Instead, any culture is always already a transcultural process through which human beings came to know and understand each other, and we come to the point where all these objects and the things come to embody and embellish our understanding of the world where we share and we live in together. So here on the screen, you can see something as minor as the bridal cheek pieces, 马标, right? Something very, very small, probably we rarely paid attention to, actually entertain a lot of interesting details about how such a kind of paraphernalia for purpose of a battle, of agricultural engagement, actually can come from a place far and away in ancient times, 2,000, 3,000, and 4,000 years ago. And at that time, this culture was already being embedded in a transnational and a global network. So in this sense, I think Professor Raozen has truly demonstrated a very cosmopolitan mindset and some kind of a mentality and some kind of energy that compel her to look into the deeper layers of Chinese civilization in the past and particularly in the present. So on that point, we turn to the specifics of Professor Raozen's engagement in terms of increasing public awareness of this civilizational and archaeological studies. So on this screen, you probably could tell that besides being a great scholar and educator, Professor Raozen is also a wonderful, or actually one of the most important curators on behalf of the museums in the UK and worldwide. And here she has organized and curated a lineup of extremely exciting and inspiring exhibitions of ancient China in Europe. And she has also taken her exhibitions to tour the world. So in terms of promotion, in terms of increasing the international awareness of this global side of Chinese culture, definitely Professor Raozen has done her best in this particular field. And therefore, I want to say, beyond her engagement with the campus activities, such as teaching and learning, Professor Raozen is always accessible and available whenever we come to her for more insights and wisdom in terms of publicizing and internationalizing our understanding of the ancient, not only in Chinese terms, but also in worldly terms. And the last but not the least, Professor Raozen has also been very active in leading different teams, expeditions in discovering the ancient, say, archaeological sites in Mongolia, in Siberia, in other areas in Eurasia. So definitely, this is an extremely active scholar. And I would conclude my introduction by also suggesting that Professor Raozen has made a major contribution in promoting Chinese civilizational studies in Europe, particularly in her own country, the United Kingdom. And she was the one who helped found the Center for China, or the so-called Oxford University China Center in 2008. And she has won numerous fellowships, grants, and supports so that she could further foster this field, not only on campus, but also off campus. So to conclude, we want to really honor Professor Raozen as not only an educator, a researcher, a curator, but also a visionary. And she understands that a civilization is always an ongoing process through which people of different societies, different cultures, different times come to engage with each other through the intermediation of objects and things. Things are not just mute entities. Things do speak, and the things that really speak to us across the tunnel of time, across the immense span of centuries coming to our time. So this is a moment we all want to celebrate Professor Raozen's illustrious career, and we pay our enormous respect to her contribution to China studies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Wang. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let's watch a video of remarks from the 2022 Tang Prize Laureate in Sinology, Professor Jessica Rawson.
I'm incredibly honored to be awarded this prize, and I was astonished. I have never expected to be even considered within the category of sinology. I'm an archaeologist interested in material culture, and I'm not a specialist in the Chinese language, and so I never expected to be considered. So I was almost shocked and surprised and very happy to learn that the foundation had been interested in my work. Well, I started to be interested in China very, very young. When I was at primary school and junior high school, I was very interested in your language, in the characters of Chinese. And I was taken by my parents to see the Rosetta Stone, where Egyptian hieroglyphics are shown in parallel with Greek, which is how people learn to read hieroglyphics. And I realized there was a different way to write a language. So my first interest as a child was in the Chinese characters. Mm-hmm. And from that, my mother, who was very interested in works of art and culture, took me to many museums and introduced me to East Asian art, particularly China, but also Japan. And from that, even as a teenager, I was already interested in China. I managed to go on an excavation in Jerusalem. Jerusalem, when it was part of Jordan, there was a big excavation mm-hmm. where they showed a lot of excavated Chinese ceramics that they had come by trade in exchange to the Middle East. And that's when I started to see that archaeology was the way to learn more about China. I did first an undergraduate degree in Cambridge in history and archaeology. And then I did an undergraduate degree in Chinese with Chinese literature at the School of Oriental and African Studies in London. And that's where I learned the beginnings of Chinese culture. And at the same time, I had a job in the British Museum. So I was in a very junior level, and one thing was I was in part just teaching myself by looking at the basement, looking at every ceramic. I had the duty to write index cards, if you like, for every object. So I had to research them all, learn about the dates and so on. And that took a long time, but it's very good training, you know, very careful, slowly. And I was very, very junior in a department with mainly people 20 or 30 years older than me. They did teach me a bit, but they also taught me how to be careful, you know, how to learn what data was really necessary. So in some ways I learned a technique. I didn't learn about China so much as a technique from the museum, but that is the way I started, and I would recommend it if you want to learn about cultures physically, because in a museum you have the opportunity to pick up, handle, look at, and work with all these material objects, and it makes you think. Very few people realize that if you can pick up an object and handle it, turn it over, look at it in your hands, then you learn more about it, and you learn about how it was made, whether it's big or small, heavy or light. You know, Chinese objects are quite different from Western ones. The ceramics are much harder. You use a lot of jade, we use a lot of gold and silver. You know, physically that's a big difference, and I learned a lot about it in that very physical way.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us at the 2022 Tang Prize Award announcement in Sinology. The Tang Prize Award ceremony will take place on September 23rd this year. We look forward to seeing you then. And tomorrow we'll be making the award announcement for the 2022 Tang Prize in Rule of Law at the same time. Thank you very much.